Like any organization of moderate scale, the establishment has some structures and procedures set in place to ensure a smoothly functioning house. These include chores, house meetings, house managers, house interviews, and house funds.
How do you react when someone asks, so how does that work? Living with 20 people.
God, all I usually say is that it's less complicated and less weird than you'd think.
I think it works by virtue of just doing our duties to the house and then just being ourselves and being open to connecting with our housemates. Just people, certain people like go getters, like taking it upon themselves as well as the house manager to make sure that things get done outside of just chores, helping us to get ready for events or to be on committees and to make things happen that would otherwise not occur.
Something that allows the house to run smoothly and as intended in terms of being a community is a shared kitchen space. My theory is that without a shared kitchen space, it would be a lot different in terms of people's relationships to each other and the house. And like structurally, just this like place where everyone communes, whether or not they're trying. Everyone's got to eat. Most other things are kind of optional, like you don't have to hang out in a den, you don't have to be spending time in the yard with other people, but like just the fact that it's something you rely upon that you will necessarily share with other people, I think is really, really integral.
What is one logistical thing that you think is vital to allowing this house to run smoothly?
First thing that comes to mind is definitely the chore wheel. It's definitely a structural part of the house that I think is pretty much vital, because without it, people would forget the order of what needs to be done. And chore wheel kind of forces us to do the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Could be any chore. It could be from like doing rags and bath mats to cleaning one of the bathrooms to cleaning the kitchen floors.
If there's something that's going wrong, we can lovingly call each other out on it and be like, hey, do you need help with this? Or are you having a hard time? And is there anything we can do? House meetings, the first Tuesday of every month.
Typically, we all gather in the den. Ideally, it's all 19 people, maybe a few animals. They're typically led by the manager. We collect agenda items in advance, so we'll start off and we go around in our circle and we'll do gratitudes.
Kind of just focus on something positive and what are we grateful for, today or this month.
We move through the agenda, and ideally there's hand raising that happens to ensure that there isn't people speaking over other people. Not to say that that doesn't happen.
I'm kind of glad that they are mandatory.
I think our most contentious topic is whether or not we should have a disc drainer. So
So Willie was just a housemate, and she implemented house meetings. There would just be house meetings. It wasn't a regular thing. It was just when there was conflict or when something needed to be discussed. Oh, wow. There would be like on-call house meetings, kind of, and not regular house meetings. So I think that was a huge change. Just having a regular check-in time was awesome.
I think it's important to have like regular gathering, whether or not you have huge issues to talk through or big, complicated problems. I think just having that regularity is something that keeps people tied to what we're doing here and it's kind of like a reminder of the community aspect, as are many other things, but the meetings, in terms of getting like the whole group together, it's not a super common occurrence.
House manager is the one that rallies us all, rallies the troops.
Strictly speaking, the role of the manager is being a liaison between the owners and the tenants, and also purchasing any sort of communal goods, so buying the toilet paper. But in reality, not in theory, the position of the manager is a lot more than that.
When I was manager, like, I rallied the house to do all kinds of crazy stuff. The manager, like, the role that the manager has filled has certainly changed over time. But I think that sort of a common thread amongst all the managers is that they are people who tend to be attuned with others' emotions, and they sort of just have their pulse, their fingers on the pulse of the house. And I think that probably all the managers have tried to cultivate or at least retain the culture, like there's sort of these like cultural transmitters through time.
Interviews are held either in the den or on the deck.
We will generally just sit in a big old group.
We will typically go around and have everybody introduce themselves and end on our interviewee and have them talk about themselves for the most part.
I think the interviews are integral because that decides who we have to spend a lot of our time with and who we're going to be living with. So it's a great way to test the waters with people and just get a feel of their hobbies, their desires, their passions, their quirks.
It kind of like breaks the ice. And then when you see them, you're able to connect with them a little bit, or maybe remember part of their interview and say, oh, you're into this, like, oh, I'm also into this, or I'm into something that's related.
I did institute the interview system, invented the first batch of interview questions, and the way that housemates like come into the house. So I changed that system from what it had been when I moved in. And it's cool to see that that's still being carried out today, although it has changed over time too.
House funds are the funds that we use to do things for the house, such as like buy toilet paper and hand soap and different cleaning supplies.
House funds are important. In the past, we've raised house funds with our yearly Halloween party.
The house funds are currently raised by we have a tithe that we take every month that we put in along with our rent. It's a sliding scale, depending on how much you're able to put in.
How does the establishment function well with so many different tenants? Sometimes it doesn't. But also generally we allow people to have whatever amount of space they need. I think there are people who have really brief stays because they recognize that like it's more of a commitment than what they maybe perceived or what they ultimately wanted. I think there's a lot of wiggle room for different types of personalities because we don't have any sort of common mission beyond wanting to live together and navigate living with 19 people together in a space. So, if we were a community that was based around like some sort of common income, farming or whatever it is, I think personalities would be maybe a little more homogenous, but just the fact that it's just a big house where like we all live together and don't have any sort of specific thing we're all united to do beyond live together. I don't think there's a high demand for people to be exactly the same.
Yeah, I think all these things come together to create like a well-oiled machine and create something that's actually feasible, like something that's actually like a living, breathing community, like an ant colony, where we have like this hive intelligence, and it takes all of us to create that, and it's a beautiful thing, in my opinion.